Okay, so we're back. What day is today? It is the 22nd of December. So it's been like 2 or 3 weeks since Ludum Dare, and so I've got some feedback from that, but not the final results. Feedback is mostly positive, so that's good. Feel like if I had to guess, maybe it would be cool if it was like top 100 overall for compo. That'd be cool. Top 100 for fun would be really awesome. I don't know if I'm going to get that. Um, Probably not in any other category, but I don't know. That's fine. Whatever. This is not the sort of game that's going to get super top marks or anything. But I've been in Europe for a while on a business trip, and I ended up working a bunch on this game and did a bunch of stuff, kind of post compo stuff. Um, because really I wanted to like deliver on the promise of the game. Because you couldn't really fill this hospital, not really. You'd end up getting about this much stuff as I've got here, and then you wouldn't have enough patients to fill the hospital. Like just not enough would come into the waiting room because I balanced it poorly. And beyond that, like you couldn't really fill it with interesting stuff. You ended up filling it with a lot of the same units, but there just wasn't enough variety in what was there. A patient died. Um, so yeah, there were a couple other things that were issues with it. The original compo release. You never really got beyond the tutorial. It just kind of it felt like, okay, now do this, now do this, now do this, and then absolutely nothing. But that didn't. There really wasn't much to do at that point. I mean, it's a prototype, whatever, but it felt like a tutorial the whole time, and I think that's probably where people stopped was the end of that tutorial. And we'll talk about it, but I made a tweak to kind of make it less of a tutorial because that became a problem when I started adding a bunch more new rooms. It felt more like a tutorial. It was a little difficult to understand some of the simulation going on and some of the requirements for rooms. I don't know if I fully addressed that in the post compo build. Some of the descriptions are a bit better, and hopefully it kind of makes sense what they do. Though there's some real detail to the mechanics that I don't know that I could ever really fully expose without like a paragraph on some of these, like exactly how the crash carts work or whatever. Anyway, so if you've looked at the original version, this looks somewhat similar. Some of the biggest visual changes. We'll talk about this in a second, but this is the new research mechanic. So, just want to show that off. But unlocked a new building, unlocked a new facility, I guess. Some of the obvious visual changes are the background here. These buildings weren't there in the original one, and I think that was something that took 20 minutes, but I didn't have 20 minutes when I was doing it. And I think it adds a lot to the game because it kind of it places these buildings as opposed to just like, oh, there's ground and sky. It's like, okay, no, you're in a city, which hopefully makes the bus stops a little bit more sensical, though I don't know, probably still don't make sense. The other changes, there's some UI tweaks. This now has these elements now have like background colors so that you can actually read them in all the different kind of zoom levels you could be at, because they would kind of get washed out if you were in that sort of state. There's also this down here. We'll talk about that. In terms of other UI tweaks, there's also this new menu, which is these kind of act like lenses in like a civilization game of like, here's an overlay of what's going on. What did I pick? Acuity. It's like, yeah, this patient's pretty sick. Acuity score 85, chest pain, dizziness, head pain, they're in rough shape. This patient probably discharged. Yeah, just get out of here. You're fine. You're fine. And there's some other ones. There's patient satisfaction is a totally new mechanic I'll talk about in a second. How clean are the rooms? Like, okay, got a few rooms that need to be cleaned all at once. Like maybe I should have another supply closet here. The yellow ones are, there's a patient in there currently. How are the elevators doing? Looks like there's a backup on this one. 7 passengers and 5 people in line. Yeah, a bunch of people getting off, probably a bunch of people going to get on. That'll make that better. Nope, there's still a lot of people waiting. Yeah, okay. All right, it cleared up a little bit. Food services, it's a whole new mechanic, but are people getting food? Anyway, so there's a couple of those that help kind of help you understand the simulation, and this menu has tooltips, which it really didn't have before, I think. Oh no, it did have tooltips. What did I add? Oh, some of these rooms, if you click on like a triage center, it will jump to one of those lenses. So that's the visual changes. There's some new mechanics that weren't in the original game. Research, right. So the thing with that tutorial, the original tutorial was like, it's like, okay, now do this thing. Okay, now do this thing. Okay, now do this thing. And you get that pop-up that is like, okay, do this thing. But it is very much just you do a thing and you go on. And that became really tedious as I added more unique rooms, because it felt like I'm just following the cookie trail, or that's a bad, there's a metaphor, I just don't know what it is. But like I'm just following these preset steps, and that's not as engaging as like at a certain point you can build the administration office, and once you can build the administration office, that unlocks this like research thing, which is like, from a gameplay perspective, is really just a way to kind of slow you down and force you to like build stuff, but it kind of doles out like, hey, a new building is now available, but it feels a lot better, I think. And this was not that much work. If I do another simulation game like this, I will probably implement the system, because it was really easy to just, it's the exact same code under the hood of, it's just this linear series of unlock this room, unlock this room, unlock this room, unlock this room, and like between each one, wait for this thing to happen. But it's like, wait for this building to be constructed, or wait for the research timer to tick down. Like that's very simple, but it feels a lot better. Other new mechanics, this patient happiness, patient satisfaction. Okay, so here's an unlock. It's another one. The only difference is like I changed the color so that it feels different. And I had this like, okay, congratulations, you did a thing. Anyway, so patient happiness is something that's new, because you would end up with patients sitting in the waiting room for a long time. So patients get unhappy if they're sitting in the waiting room for a long time. Like, this guy's been here a while. Sucks to be him. And they get unhappy if they're not cared for frequently, more or less. Like, so if nurses are slow to get to him, doctors are slow to get to him, then they become a little unhappy. But in practice, it's generally like they're unhappy in the waiting room, and then as they're getting care, they're usually like, okay, this hospital isn't so bad. They're, treating my problems. Good for them. So it's a real basic system, and it doesn't actually power anything. Nothing happens if your patients are all furious with you. But it's maybe a good way to like identify what's going on. And if this was blown out to a full game, this would probably be more of a thing. 98% patient satisfaction. Cool. So one of the other things are these pink people. These are guests. So for the ICUs and the inpatient units, now there are guests that come to patients' rooms. That seems bugged. Why does this patient have like 3 guests? Okay. There's not that many patients in here, or they're still arriving or something. Anyway, whatever. So guests come through, and they also contribute to patient happiness. So like a guest comes to the patient room, that makes them happier. And then because there's guests, there's also I do have a cafeteria. You can, if the guests walk by a gift shop or cafeteria, they will maybe purchase something, so you can make a little bit of money. It's not a lot. 21 patients visit, or 21 guests went to the gift shop today. I don't know. That's not a lot of money, probably, but yeah, it every little bit helps, and it gives them something to do. Mostly, they're there to clog your elevators. That's mostly their actual purpose. And they do contribute to patient happiness, and if this was a full game, they would probably contribute in more ways to that. But yeah, the big thing was I added a lot of new rooms. Let me run through. The triage center was there. I added urgent care, because once I had some of these other systems in place, it became obvious that you had a lot of patients that were kind of sitting in your waiting room for a long time, not getting care, because it was like, there'd always be somebody with a higher acuity coming in, and some of those patients were just kind of sit there going, come on, get to me, and it's like, well, that's not, you aren't that sick, other people need the care more than you do. So now those patients can just kind of quickly be seen by a nurse and get out there. So that's these rooms up here. So like this patient in there, nurse is going to come by, chat with them, give them some meds probably. Urgent care visit. Yeah, I don't have a super easy way to like find them now, and I can't just click on them. I never implemented that, but yeah, maybe they got some meds or something, whatever. But it gets those patients out of the waiting rooms. Speaking of which, I'm going to build another waiting room. I meant to do that earlier. More guests will spawn too, which is more patients will spawn as one of the other changes. It's tied, this is still dumb, it's tied to the number of waiting rooms. Whatever. It lets you actually, you can actually fill the hospital. I did this last night, and you can have about 200 patients before you kind of run out of space. Like 200 patients, but then like 60 in a waiting room, and I don't know, probably 200 more staff and guests total across the whole building. But you can kind of, you bring in more people by building more waiting rooms, which is whatever. It's fine. It's fine. They're, again, not how I would do this in a full game, but it's fine. It lets you fill the hospital. Oh, new buildings. I was talking about new buildings. This was an old building. CT scanner was already there. Crash carts are new. Do we see, there was a patient crashing a minute ago. I don't see anybody now, but there's these little things which are, oh, that guy just came back. So if you're in a hospital, if you have a heart attack while you're in a hospital, like, you're probably going to die unless somebody comes by and tries to save you. So usually there's like a dedicated team that will kind of try to rush to a patient's room in a real hospital, and they have like a cart. Oh, let's follow this guy. Where's he going? He's going up here. So the blue light, once you have the crash carts unlocked, the blue light means that patient is in the process of dying. And that was it's a code blue. It's not always a code. Oh, he did not make it. He did not make it. There's a chance that they don't. It's a higher chance than real life. It is TV odds, not actual odds, because if you have a heart attack, you're in real rough shape. But anyway, so these guys kind of just run around the hospital and try to stop patients from dying, and that's effectively what they are in the game. And let's see, these were all there. Pharmacy and blood bank. I haven't built a blood bank, have I? Did I build 2 pharmacies? No. Blood bank. Blood bank. Both of these buildings are kind of similar. Both these rooms are kind of similar. There's just kind of this system of meds and blood. These various rooms use medication. So like every time a patient gets a medication on this unit, it comes from the nurse's station, or if they're in surgery or trauma center, then they're just going to be given various meds, and like this just refills them. It's not a very like realistic representation of like medical supplies, but it's a rough approximation, and there is a, I don't know where the cart is, but there's a guy with a cart that is running around delivering those supplies. And the same thing with the blood bank, except there's it's really just the operating rooms and the trauma centers that need blood, not so much the nurses' stations, which isn't realistic, but whatever. There's a whole this culinary thing. So you build a kitchen, and then you build a food cart, and the food cart delivers food to the inpatient units, because usually you would have like a food services that would deliver food, and like both this and the pharmacy and the blood bank all kind of work a little bit the same. Of like, if you don't have them, or if you can't get them in time, like the food service doesn't arrive within the day window, then oh, I need more emergency rooms. Right, I was doing that. If they don't arrive, then it's not that bad, really. Like, all that really happens is you just pay more for whatever the event is that happens. So like, oh, okay, we needed meds and we couldn't get it, so you just pay more. That's kind of the best way I could balance it, because it's not realistic, but also like the alternative is like really gross or wouldn't be fun at all. So it's like, I kind of described this in the tutorial as like, well, we were getting food from like down the street. We were just ordering it. That's expensive. So if we like just made our own in the kitchen, then you know, there's that, yeah, that's a food cart. If we just made our own in the kitchen, then hey, would save some money, basically. So this is the end of the research tree. So I have unlocked everything at this point. I didn't know what else to do, so you just get money. You just get research grants. I wasn't sure what else to do at that point. And that just is a simple way to make sure that you have cash. I'm going to build a CT scanner now. Probably another OR, actually. Cool. You still can go negatives in the money. I didn't change that. It's whatever. Other new rooms. Where was I? Pharmacy, food. Oh, and okay, so there's the cafeteria, which is, I said earlier, like guests will have a 50% chance of eating at the cafeteria, and then they have like food. I'm pointing at the screen, but you can't see that. They have like a food, so every time somebody visits, it takes food away, and then when they'll go pick stuff up from the kitchen. That's the blood cart, I think. That's the blood cart. And so this is just, yeah, it's a way to get some money, and like an additional use of the kitchen. Operating room CT scanner. I renamed this. This was the nuclear imaging or something. I wasn't sure if CT was a brand name for some reason. Express elevators were there. Gift shop is, there's a patient in the gift shop, or a guest in the gift shop. Yep. Went in, went out. Okay, whatever. Similar to the cafeteria, guests go in and don't come out. I should maybe look at that. Huh. Weird. I think guests go in and don't come out. I think guests go in and don't come out. Okay, that's cool. It's supposed to like just make you some money. Apparently it swallows guests. That's cool. And then there's these administration offices. So I've got them, I think, up here. Obviously these are very similar, but this is the administration office, and this is the billing office, and then there's medical records. And these are just kind of static like buffs of rooms. So like the billing office just makes sure that you get more money from patients. So like when you get reimbursed, or there's a patient settlement, like you just get more money than you would otherwise. The administration office powers research. So like if you have administration, then you need that to trigger the research. And then medical records is this really subtle thing where like it helps with the diagnosis of patients. That's a bad example. Yeah, I need more trauma beds. This patient never actually went to the trauma center. it just helps with diagnosis, which is a really kind of subtle thing. I don't know if it's the brightest idea or not, but yeah, it's just like, okay, now doctors can more effectively find a diagnosis, and once the patient is diagnosed, then they can treat it. Once they're treated, then they get better a lot faster. So it kind of helps with that model. Anyway, that is, I think, all the new stuff I implemented. Yeah, so I got back from Europe and said, pencils down, that's it. It probably still isn't a candidate for a good candidate for a complete game, like turning this into like a big commercial release. I still don't think that the marketability is not there, and as much as I find some of this stuff kind of fascinating to build and think about, like some of how these things function and stuff, and how to turn real life systems into gameplay, I really don't think it's a good candidate for making it a more complete game. It could be, maybe in a year, maybe I'll come back to it and go like, yeah, all right, maybe. Yay, research grant, more money that I'm not doing anything with. Yeah, so let's talk about what I didn't do. There's a bunch of things I wanted to do and just never had time, but I'm calling it done. I didn't do any outpatient care, which is something I kind of wanted to do. Is like, okay, there's other patients that just come in to see their doctor, or come in just for a surgery or just for radiology. That's a big chunk of hospitals, but it would have been a big code change too. So I said, no, let's not do that. I don't have a laboratory. I was going to do that. I literally forgot until I was making this list of stuff I didn't do. But it was going to be something kind of like a pharmacy of patients. You have lab tests, and okay, it'd be a way to make lab tests cheaper, because lab tests actually are frequent and they cost you a bunch of money right now. Lab tests, well, it adds up because lab tests are pretty frequent. So if you could reduce your actual cost of lab tests by having your own in-house lab, then make more money. Literally forgot about it. I debated a while about how to do specialty care. In a real hospital, you probably have here's your cardiac unit or your lung unit or your cancer center or whatever. I couldn't come up with a good way to do it. I really didn't want to make it okay, I'm going to pick this region and this is now the heart center, or another menu of here's 6 or specialties or whatever. I'm thinking if I was going to do that, it would probably just be here's a cardiologist office, an alternative to the doctor's office that is just a doctor that kind of roams throughout the whole hospital, just for the patients that have heart conditions or potential heart conditions. But yeah, I didn't get around to that. Didn't get around to any of that decision-making stuff that I was talking about a while ago of here are 2 horrible options to pick between, but one costs you money and one hurts patients. Pick one. So I didn't know how to integrate that when I had also this research system. So I just ended up not doing it. Also, I didn't implement a day-night cycle. There is actually a day-night cycle in the game. It's not real obvious. But I just was no, do not implement a day-night cycle. I'm doing that in another game. And no. It ends up being more work than it sounds always. I don't know. It can't be that hard, but yeah, it can be. So yeah, I think it's a good prototype for a complete game. Definitely needs more. You're still definitely railroaded. Part of that is just the research is very linear, and obviously if this was a complete game, it would definitely be a research tree that you can pick from. But unlike a lot of other sim games the Big Pharma, or is that the name of it? Production Line or Roller Coaster Tycoon, this doesn't quite fit into some of those models where there's not the kind of deep creativity to it, where you're still just building a hospital, and there's not the kind of problem solving, like massive optimization problem. There is some of that, and you can optimize in certain ways, but not to the extent that you can in like Factorio or production line or something. Like there just isn't the, like, because so much of the care for patients is so patient specific, you can't really like it's a little bit random, and you don't have like a really good tight control to like optimize it. It's still like I need to build a inpatient unit and a cardiac or ICU and some of these other things, and you need to build them, and they're gonna kind of look the same each time. So there's not a ton of replayability as is. So I think this is kind of the shell of a game, but not that complete of a game. And I think it needs some work in that respect. And I don't know how I would make it replayable, but I think it would need to be. Scenarios don't really make sense. Like if I changed the building layouts, like, okay, now it's a really big hospital, it's still the same thing you're building. And like, okay, you can move stuff around, but it's still the same thing you're building. So I'm thinking like if I was going to expand this, it would probably be like, there'd probably be like a meta game to it, like a macro level of, okay, this is your like flagship hospital, and you're expanding it over time and making it bigger and bigger and bigger, and all like tons of really detailed specialties show up and stuff. But there's also like a regional map or something, like maybe I think it'd probably be like, here's a big city, like and then a suburbs, like that is your regional map, and you're building your flagship hospital downtown, and then like, okay, I want to build an urgent care center here, and that'll funnel patients to the main hospital, or like a physician's office here those patients in that region won't need to go to the hospital as often because they're seeing their doctors, or kind of a meta game like that probably makes the most sense. Yeah, I think I said it before. I don't think the marketability is really there. Like I find this stuff fascinating, but I don't know that other people would. So maybe next year, we'll see. But this has been fun. Yeah, I think that's all I got to say. So bye for now. Work or whatever. Anyway, so if you've looked at the original version, this looks somewhat similar. Some of the biggest visual changes. We'll talk about this in a second, but this is the new research mechanic. So just want to show that off. But unlocked a new building. Unlocked a new facility, I guess. Some of the obvious visual changes are the background here. These buildings weren't there in the original one, and I think that was something that took 20 minutes, but I didn't have 20 minutes when I was doing it. And I think it adds a lot to the game because it places these buildings as opposed to just like, oh, there's ground and sky. It's like, okay, no, you're in a city, which hopefully makes the bus stops a little bit more sensical, though I don't know, probably still don't make sense. The other changes, there's some UI tweaks. This now has these elements. Okay, so we're back. What day is today? It is the 22nd of December. So it's been like 2 or 3 weeks since Ludum Dare. And so I've got some feedback from that, but not the final results. Feedback is mostly positive, so that's good. I feel like if I had to guess, maybe it would be cool if it was like top 100 overall for compo. That'd be cool. Top 100 for fun would be really awesome. I don't know if I'm going to get that. Probably not in any other category, but. I don't know. That's fine. Whatever. This is not the sort of game that's going to get super top marks or anything. But tutorial, It just kind of felt like, okay, now do this, now do this, now do this, and then absolutely nothing. But there really wasn't much to do at that point. I mean, it's a prototype, whatever, but it felt like a tutorial the whole time. And I think that's probably where people stopped, was the end of that tutorial. And we'll talk about it, but I made a tweak to kind of make it less of a tutorial, because that became a problem when I started adding a bunch more new rooms. It felt more like a tutorial. It was a little difficult to understand some of the simulation going on and some of the requirements for rooms. I don't know if I fully addressed that in the post-compo build. Some of the descriptions are a bit better, and hopefully it kind of makes sense what they do, though there's some real detail to the mechanics that I don't know that I could ever really fully expose without like a paragraph on some of these, like exactly how the crash carts. I've been in Europe for a while on a business trip, and I ended up working a bunch on this game and did a bunch of stuff, kind of post-compo stuff. Because really, I wanted to like deliver on the promise of the game. Because you couldn't really fill this hospital, not really. You'd end up getting about this much stuff as I've got here, and then you wouldn't have enough patients to fill the hospital. Like, just not enough would come into the waiting room because I balanced it poorly. And beyond that, like you couldn't really fill it with interesting stuff. You end up filling it with a lot of the same units, but there just wasn't enough variety in what was there. A patient died. So yeah, there were a couple other things that were issues with it, the original compo release. You never really got beyond the now like background colors so that you can actually read them in all the different kind of zoom levels you could be at, because they would kind of get washed out if you were in that sort of state. There's also this down here. We'll talk about that. In terms of other UI tweaks, there's also this new menu, which is these kind of act like lenses in like a Civilization game of like, here's an overlay of what's going on. What did I pick? Acuity. It's like, yeah, this patient's pretty sick. Acuity score 85, chest pain, dizziness, head pain, they're in rough shape. This patient probably discharged. Yeah, just get out of here. You're fine. You're fine. And there's some other ones. There's patient satisfaction is a totally new mechanic I'll talk about in a second. How clean are the rooms? Like, okay, got a few rooms that need to be cleaned all at once. Like, maybe I should have another supply closet here. The yellow ones are, there's a patient in there currently. How are the elevators?